you mangy dogs. Swab the decks and hoist the sails. The guns on board be needing some proper manning. Pieces of 8 and a fine wench on your arm. If your work be not too shoddy. Careful not to flounder too badly, though, or you may have to dance the hempen jig as we see you to Davy Jones. Jeffy, my boy, on with the show.
Welcome, everybody, friends, folks, foes, and fellow pirate mateys, to our weekly edition of Pirate Radio Podcast. It's episode number 329, Nature is the Answer, with Cory Edmund Endrulat. Before we get to him and his biography, let us remind you that WPRPN.com is the website you want to drop by. Sign up is free. All it requires to get the ball rolling is the username, password, and email address. From there, everything should be pretty much straightforward. If you do happen to run into any problems along the way, do not hesitate in getting back to us via our main email, pirate1radio@protonmail.com. Before we go any further, I should remind you that, of course, as always, I myself am your trusty host and companion, the Robin Hood's Chief Communications Officer, Jeffy Ryder. Do take a few moments to check out the show description end of things as well. We have a Teespring presence where things such as t-shirts and coffee mugs are readily up for grabs. We have a Patreon and a few other handy-dandy social media links. The aforementioned email address, pirate1radio@protonmail.com, is what we have running in conjunction with the PayPal end of things. It's also how you can contact us if you have any show suggestions or guest ideas in mind that you'd like to bounce off of us. So definitely do take note of that. If you'd like to help us out, but doubloons are in short supply, shall we say, fear not. Liking, commenting, sharing, remembering to hit the subscription notification buttons, always very helpful and appreciated, along with, of course, passing word along to friends, family, and coworkers. It really does help to generate a lot of great quality underground digital Fifth Estate pirate synergy. So I think that pretty much covers it for now. Let's get to the bio end of things. Introducing this week's feature guest, none other than meta-modern abolitionist, fellow human being, and messenger of nature, Cory Edmund Endrulat. Host of the End of Slavery Summit. He also serves as chief editor of the Liberator 2 news, a mass collaborative network advocating a voluntary free world, specializing in topics regarding health, education, freedom, morality, and action. All his work connect to the mission and message known as Nature is the Answer. That's hashtag NITA. Author of several books, including Slavery Gone for Good, Government is Unnatural, The Arda Diet, Naturosophy, and Nature's Radical Honesty. Cory's also a speaker, natural law teacher, Integrative Nutrition Health Coach, content creator, presenter, organizer, and inventor. Originally from Pennsylvania, the birthplace of American independence, he now resides in Florida. And we got your social media links shared right below the introductory biographical overview and synopsis, Cory, that being primarily the Liberator.us and your tap link uh, website, which you're really plugged in and I guess tapped in to a considerable wide array of social media. How many platforms?
Hey, yeah. Thank you
And,
for inviting me on.
and welcome,
I
yes,
don't
that's
know. I
right.
can't even count myself. You're on a lot of platforms too, though. I will say that. You're quite plugged in.
Somewhat so. We definitely are. So indeed, we try to get around. Uh, but
As do I.
there you go. And I think we first, in fact, we saw you over on BitChute. Actually, was where we you either there or Mines. Actually, we
Hmm.
dropped by Mines just last night in doing the prep work here for the show, and via my Jaffe Rider personal channel, we noticed that we'd already subscribed to you. So, and as you may well know, um, so that goes back a ways. Who knows when we actually first connected, just on that level.
Yeah.
Uh, but you may know that there's a 5,000 member subscription cap that Minds has in place. I'm not sure if that was
No, I actually didn't know about the cap,
okay.
but I
Hmm.
am aware of mines, and I do have it posting there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sure. Sure. It'd be great to see you more active, if only because, well, there's a lot of great groups that are in place, including Florida and a whole number of others that I'm guessing would be at least somewhat interested in taking a look at. But the behind the scenes matrix chat, I've been pretty impressed with as far as the ability to connect with a wider number of people. So we've been making a lot of great friends and you know contacts basically around the world through that means.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, where would you like to start things then? We've there's so much that we could
Yeah. Well, we'll start
address.
with networking. You just mentioned it, right?
Sure.
If anybody's listening, I think first and foremost is if you live somewhere, it doesn't matter where it is, you can find people in your area. And I made a video dedicated to help people do this. So I figured to give the shout out. And I've been trying to give the shout out lately. If you go to my website, a news website I run, the Liberator.us, there's a networking page, and I have a video that goes over 20 different strategies to how you can find people in your area. Now, when I was new to Florida, because I was raised in Pennsylvania my whole life, I came down here. The minute I started doing events, I was networking with so many different groups. Our first event was out the door because I used so many resources to do it, and I was like amazed. I was like, I couldn't believe how many people I got to show up. And then from there, it was about trying to make sure those people stay connected. So I create a Telegram because it's easy for people to use. It's not as safe necessarily as Element or Matrix, as you mentioned, or maybe some other alternatives, but it's very helpful and it is somewhat decentralized. So a lot of us in Florida have been using that. And I also recently put out a video on how people can prevent spam and scam links on Telegram. So, I try to create content to help people create content and network with others and ultimately create the change that is needed for this world. So my focus, my work is all created because it's not being created and because there's this great need to actually change things. And unfortunately, I think independent media, they could have done this 20, 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. But I think we're finally starting to take up the reins now to get it in our hands and really organize what needs to happen to create an actual change in this world. And I'm seeing it in Florida. I'm in Florida, as you mentioned. I'm seeing these communities come together. I'm seeing the potential. I'm seeing quite literally the future and how it can get better. I know you and I talked a little bit before this about like, should we look at reality as like this grim, like, oh, we're never going to actually attain reality, we're going to stay stuck in illusion, or, is it utopian and it's like never going to happen? Well, I think it's actually very realistic, and we're taking steps toward that realistic world without having to engage in the illusion. And I absolutely think that that is the case. And I can give examples such as Jim Gale and his 50-acre operation in St. Cloud. That's going on to inspire so many people to do the same project in Florida. that one project. And so once then I get my project up and going, imagine how many others will also be inspired from me. And then you have this ripple effect that happens where the abolitionists create one town for the Underground Railroad, then there's 5 towns, then there's 10 towns, then there's 20 towns. And now you have all these towns that are separate from the government that are doing their own thing, becoming self sustainable, building communities. And guess what? Now you got those voluntary governments, which are the replacement of this involuntary, coercive, violent system of government that we have now. And some people may be listening and may not, be where I'm at, like talking about like permaculture and growing food and building communities, and that's okay. Or even understanding government and the nature of its systems. That's okay. If you have an open mind, I welcome you to delve into this material because, like I said, I don't really hear it being talked about in many other places.
Well put. Yeah. So thank you for the
Thank you.
overview, a
Thank you
rundown.
for allowing me to share.
Yeah. Well, w- there's a few things as far as look at YouTube. We're talking about networking, of course,
Mhm.
and online and in person. I'm not sure how many public presentations you've been a part of in real life, as it were, in what do they call it in the meat space over the past year or however long it is since you got things off the ground. But YouTube, as an example, Twitter, although things have changed somewhat under Musk having taken the helm, Facebook, of course, and so many other examples. I mean, we got kicked off of Discord and Twitch
So did
ourselves.
I. I got kicked off of Discord,
Yeah,
and I didn't even do anything. I think it's just because
exactly.
I ran the server, and the
Right.
server had people posting stuff, so they
Yeah.
banned me because I ran the server. It's
Right.
messed up.
Yeah. That's what happened to us. So it's kind of like a collective punishment or guilt by association
Yeah,
is one way of looking at it. It's like it utterly. So that's what we need to stay away from. It would seem obviously very toxic platforms, which I still ourselves we work with them, but we're also having to contend with endless warnings and strikes via YouTube and elsewhere, of course. It's problematic the way that we are required to go about sharing content and communicating with others. That's largely what it's all about. So I'm building these virtual online communities along with the ability magically to bring people together in once again that actual real life meat space. It's happened on multiple occasions here with just us based out of South Korea and uh, making the effort, taking the time to, and seeing
amazing.
the opportunity, the potential for people who we know and are part of this virtual pirate network to come together. And so far, our batting average, I would say, has been pretty good. There haven't been, some decent friendships, relationships, and opportunity for people to work together. So, but Minds, as an example, as a counter example, Rumble, BitChute, and what else are we looking at there? What would you say serve as counterpoint type examples or templates, the way that the platforms are being developed to these more toxic legacy outfits like YouTube, Fake Book, and so forth. What?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, well, someone mentioned in the chat, is there such a thing as a non-toxic platform? I mean, I think the internet by its nature is toxic, but I think what you mean by toxic is like, controlling and telling people what to think,
Hmm.
and hampering down on free speech. I'd say Rumble is probably the best video alternative out there. And that's because, well, a lot of the founders of Rumble have made deals with like bigger content creators on YouTube, and they've managed to bring them over. And so they're very strategic with what they're doing, and they're also well connected with the UFC, and that they have a big following among the right wingers. So a lot of right wingers are joining Rumble, and those right wingers tend to be more freedom of speech oriented. So I think Rumble is becoming more of that alternative to YouTube. And when it comes to live streaming, you have Rumble as well, and Kick. Kick is like a live streaming platform that was founded by a gambling company, but it was also founded by some former Twitch streamers. So I thought those were quite interesting alternatives. When it comes to Facebook, I think Minds was great, but Minds is kind of marketed as like an alternative to Twitter, I would think. Facebook, I think people should just do away with. I think people are generally done with it. It's mostly 40 and up using Facebook at this point. People, people still miss MySpace. And someone just mentioned in the chat. I don't blame you if you miss MySpace. A lot of people do, because it was like this small period of time, and then it kind of just got quickly corrupted by Facebook. But people, I think, are missing the old internet, and people are missing the ability to say what they want to say, which I think is why Elon Musk and a lot of the things that have been happening lately are starting to move in that direction of freedom of speech, but not necessarily freedom, period. Just because you have freedom of speech does not mean you are necessarily free. And, they're going to throw you a bone once in a while to make you feel like you're free, make you feel like you're happy, make you feel like they care about you. But that's not the point. If you have somebody who rules over you, you don't own you, you're not free. It's either you're free or you're not. And for so long, humanity has grappled for thousands of years with this, like, I'm going to throw you a bone, and I'm going to throw you another bone, and eventually you're going to like me. And eventually you have no choice, because if you don't, I'm just going to throw the bone and hit you on the head with it. It's like, and it's like, okay, well, now I have no choice but to grab the bone. I guess that's like a good analogy, but you get the point. Humanity is learning their lesson, and they learn, unfortunately, through violence, through these government systems telling them what to do, what not to do, and that violence often backfires. And humanity's realizing, we need to think about better solutions. But most people, the first thing they resort to is that system of violence. Let's change the laws. Let's change the politician. They're not actually looking at the fundamentals of these systems. So I think it's very important to get down to the fundamentals, right? What is the internet supposed to do? It's a freedom, open forum of ideas, and each space has its own rules. Like I own my own channel on YouTube or Twitch or whatever it is, right? And I have my own rules because I set it for my own channel. I same thing for my own business. Like everything depends on the fundamentals, right? And when we're talking about the world and how the world is governed, like we got to get down to the fundamentals. And this is why people talk about natural law and natural rights and what is freedom, what is slavery, what is ownership. And I really hit the nail on those topics, especially, in my latest book, Slavery Gone for Good, the Black Book edition, where I talk about for thousands of years how we're trying to figure it out. It's crazy, right? For thousands of years, we still haven't figured out the definition of a right, or we haven't figured out, if everybody should be treated equal. We only found that out about like 200 years ago. It's like, oh yeah, men and women they're equal. Like we just found that out. Same thing with like, different races, and it's just amazing
That's
the
right.
leaps and bounds of progress that humanity is making. A lot of it is fairly new. So when we're upset and we're saying, man, humanity's not learning, there's so much to be done, just bear in mind that, time moves pretty fast. And Nazi Germany was not even 100 years ago. The abolitionists were not even 200 years ago. Not even 300 years ago was the American Revolution, where it's like one of the first times where the monarchy was challenged. So these are new ideas being brought into the world, although they might have some ancient origins as well.
Indeed. And then speaking of fundamentals and ancient origins, if you would take us back. And I also mentioned your black book edition
Hmm.
that you recently published. That definitely caught my attention just in the lead up to working on putting the show together. Piqued my interest and curiosity. Very much would like to look into that a little further, along with the tie-in to Christianity and the history, Jesus.
Sure.
And there was one particular individual that you mentioned in one of your, I guess it was recent talks, that you spoke quite highly of. I'm not sure if you know who I'm referring to. Someone who's done a lot of research on the history of Christ. I'm not sure if he brings to the table uh, an Essene type tie-in, or you've done a lot as well. Let's not forget of Gnostic, but Taoist uh, analysis and research, reflection, self-reflection, presumably over the years. Isn't it interesting? The Gospel of Thomas. I'm not sure. I'm willing to bet you probably have taken at least a glance at it. But my impression in looking at that was it was very Taoist, the Gospel of Thomas, and that is, I think, definitely worth taking, paying close attention to and taking note of.
Yeah. There's actually quite an interesting array of books called, I think it's called the Jesus Sutras, and then there's
Oh yeah, right.
and I think that goes into how like Jesus and his ideas kind of spread to China and other places.
Yeah,
And
well,
I've come
yeah.
across different books talking about these concepts, so you can definitely see the tie-in. And they're all observing the same reality, so it wouldn't be surprising to see any connections between these different cultures.
Well, do you know? Here's the thing. Absolutely, Corey. That the original name of Christianity. Do you know what apparently it was referred to as?
Um, I know that like that term was more new, but no, what is it going to be?
The same as what Taoism is often known as,
Yeah.
simply the way.
Right.
That's it.
It's true that
The
because they
way.
didn't come up with that term either till later on. Taoism, like the ism, was not really part of the philosophy until later on. People look back on it and they're like, "Oh, we can make a ism out of it."
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's then, if you would now, do you recall who it is that I'm trying to? If I would have done my little
Well, I
more in the
know I
way of
talk a
homework.
lot about Carl Jung, and I know
N-
that
Well,
you're super
no, no,
interested
no.
in
This is
him.
the this
But
is I
is
loved it.
this Leo Tolstoy?
No, 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 no. This is a more
Okay.
modern day contemporary commentator. I believe he's still alive, and that you actually are in contact with, and that you're
Okay.
really quite blown away by his analysis, his assessment of early day.
Jason Gregory?
That sounds, yeah, that could be it. Definitely,
That
yeah.
might be him.
Hmm. Yeah. So,
There's a good amount of people I like to follow. I follow a lot of different cultures. I'm very open to minded to everybody, but yes, Jason Gregory is one of my most favorites on the internet. I'd say at this moment. I know a lot of people might think Mark Passio, but Jason Gregory is very proficient in a lot of different religions and philosophies. I just think he has a great way of delivering the message. He has documentaries, and they're very impactful.
Jason Gregory will have to definitely take note of that then. So, Epic Proportion Media Productions. Big shout out to you, of course, here in the chat end of things. Joey Boomer, Joshua Huckle. Great to have uh, all of you on board. Paganism is the question here. Just that Epic Proportion Media Lee has offered via the comment end of things, and my understanding, if you want to look at the etymology, the term itself, pagan, simply meant uh, country dweller, like a kind of a rube, is the term that I often I can't help but turn to, just a simple rustic folksy kind of country based person. And isn't it interesting as well, Corey? Speaking of, because I, as I'm sure you do, are, you're someone who very much loves wordplay and
Sure.
etymology, but propaganda. Have you ever stopped to take a moment or two to break that one down?
I think I did like a couple years ago. I forgot.
Check this out. Pro pagan da.
Oh, I know I didn't hear that
And
one
and
before.
and on just capping that off, remember that all roads lead to Rome.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Oh yeah. As far as the propaganda is concerned, yes, I can.
Yeah, I a lot of people, yeah, say that in the network. I
Uh,
when it comes to history, It's can be difficult because I studied 200 years ago, but let alone like 300 years ago, it starts to get pretty cloudy. And
Hmm.
then it's like, okay, 400, 500, and then we're talking thousands. And then some historians are like 200,000 years ago, 5 million years. It's like, what in the world? Like, I get it, you're making estimations, but then at some point in time, it's like, I don't know if we actually know exactly what happened. I mean, flooding, Atlantis, pyramids. There's a lot of interesting things out
Hmm.
there.
Shout out to Fred Gingras and Mr. Anderson as well too. Fire away, mateys, with any thoughts, comments, questions, criticisms. Have at it. I'm sure Corey will be more than happy to address anything you have to send his way. So, uh, let's see. Well, there's so much to get into here, including Carl Jung, obviously, and as I mentioned in the pre-show, I just kind of talked about how that was the way that the wife and I first managed to hit it off. That her, she had me sold. I was totally I was taken in by her mentioning Carl Jung when we struck up a conversation from that point, and the rest is history. So, but I mean, how much work have you done? We could get into Tolstoy and others, of course. Tolkien, I know, is one of your favorites.
Mhm.
But Jung himself, and I don't know, the anima, the animus, collective unconscious, so on
Mhm.
and so forth, archetypes, obviously, the shadow. Uh,
Mhm.
what is it in particular that uh, Jung has to offer that you regard as especially noteworthy, and
Yeah.
would like to just remind listeners, maybe draw to our listeners' attention in the event that they're not overly familiar with the subject material.
Yeah. Well, Jung, is very interesting. The way he thinks, I can tell it's quite methodological. You read his book, it's like, yeah, he's a psychiatrist. You can tell.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I'm still sifting through a lot of the material. It's a lot. Like, I really like to
Sure.
take this type of stuff in and go step by step. So that's why I really appreciate what my co-editor is doing. A lot of the videos I did on Carl Jung on my channel were excerpts that he found from the undiscovered self, and he added commentary to it, and then I add my commentary as well. And so we both have kind of just been studying a lot of Jung's work from that last book. I've gone through Jung's other book, particularly The Secret of the Golden Flower, which I mentioned in my Taoism book, because that one was very interesting to me. Jung is coming from this position of saying, let's look at Taoism. Let's look at Eastern religion. I personally, this is Young speaking, I personally come from a Christian, Catholic type of Western background. And these people in the East view things completely different. And I thought that was very interesting because he was able to integrate both of those ideas together, and with his expertise and knowledge on how the psyche works with his individual patients that he works with in psychology and psychiatry. So I thought that was fascinating to me. And that's what stands out. But aside from that, in his interview, there's some live interviews you can find online. There was a commentator, like an interviewer, who asked him a question. And he's like, what are your thoughts on God and religion? And Carl Jung is just like, I know God. That was his answer. He's like, I know him. It was like so savage. I loved it. And, people are puzzled. I've seen so many videos of people like just clipping that excerpt and trying to explain away what he means by it. And it's funny because I think, if you were to actually ask Jung to explain on that, it would involve some aspects of the unexplainable by its nature. And when I go into this, like in my videos, I talk about this. It's like there's a nature of the unconscious, there's the nature of the shadow. And because Jung focused on that in his work, he understood this part of the brain, the feminine part, this dark side that isn't usually seen in regards to the light, the active, the yang, the Christ figure. And so he was able to see a world that isn't necessarily commonly seen because by its nature, it's unseen. You see what I mean? And often he was able to then differentiate because of that religion versus science, because science was always trying to aim at trying to figure out the physical world, whereas spirituality and religion was like looking at the unseen. So how could you use science for religion? And he saw these like as being two very essential things, but for totally different purposes. So when people try to like cause all these disputes and attacks upon each other, it kind of can be futile in many ways. And so that's, I think, an amazing revelation you can get from Jung, and even just from studying Taoism, which is why he said Taoism was one of the best philosophies you've ever seen. I have a quote from Jung in my book where it talks about that. It's like he said Taoism is like one of the best like psychological philosophies he studied because of how close it was to his work on the unconscious. Because even if you look at the yin yang symbol, right, you have that dark part of the symbol, so it emphasizes the yin. And even within the Tao Te Ching, it talks about the Great Mother being this darkness, which is like the mother of all 10,000 things. So it's assuming that there's this idea that if you look out at the stars at night, this is going to be an analogy, if you look out at the stars at night, you see the specks of light, but you don't necessarily acknowledge the darkness around it. But without the darkness around it, you don't see the specks of light. And so that's just an analogy to put perspective on the world, is to say you really recognize some things, but you only recognize those things because of other things that are there, and you may look past those things.
That's a great point. Carl Jung, one of the things that he's remembered for is uh, having written the introduction to I think it was the first English edition of the Wilhelm Baines version of the I Ching.
Yes,
And
he
then,
loved that book.
yes, and he actually, it was the cauldron was what now I'm not sure how he divined the question. It is a form of divination, though, supposedly. Very much matrix kind of binary uh, style. It's, either or. Although, you know, if you take things back far enough, I'm not sure if you've looked into pre-Socratics, probably to a certain extent, presumably, but there's these two separate dialectics that for models that we can look at. The one which is intermingling the white or light within the darkness, darkness within the light, and the other dialectic model where what you see is, or what they, whoever, whatever philosophical school this is, wants to emphasize the mutual exclusiveness of the two. So in that sense, there is no male within the female, no light within the dark, uh, no wetness to the desert and so forth. If you follow what I'm getting at,
Yes.
but Jung was just he was a giant among intellectuals. Jordan Peterson, having done extensive, endless commentary and uh, uh, analysis regarding Jung and how critical it is that we all take the time to go within and do our shadow work, as it's
Hmm.
known. We cannot, if we if we uh, you know uh, try to do what we can to run and hide, or to ignore, or to deny that side of ourselves, that can be a big problem. It can lead to unforeseen consequences, unfortunately. But there is that one particular issue. Also, were you aware of Jung's his last book? Do you know what it was? It's quite something.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the undiscovered self, unless
N-
there's other ones, because he
n-
had a
n-
lot of different ones.
no, well, that's one of his better known
Okay.
publications, but it dealt with flying saucers.
I
It was
mean,
it was
you
flying
know,
saucers.
I love that, right? About because a lot of people in the scientific mind may feel like, oh, that's too out of reach. I should not look at that. And it's like Jung is like, no, I'm gonna look at it. So,
Right, and that's one of the things they talk about with the ET contact phenomenon, which we do cover here from time to time, that we are seen as too violent, and I don't know if you'd say out of sorts necessarily, but that we have yet to evolve and manage to abandon, do away with excessively violent tendencies. So, and working just on building a more peaceful world where, and uh, just too much in the way of this endless, fueling of crisis, order out of chaos agenda that,
Hmm.
unfortunately, the power elite seem to be so very much
Yeah. And I
addicted
will
to.
say, uh, the elites kind of feed also on our over speculation of it too. I mean, even just our theories of it as well. Look at the Illuminati card deck, and look
Right.
at the
S-
card that says conspiracy theorist, and look what it says.
Steve
I mean,
Jackson is what you're talking about now?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's not too far fetched to think that the conspiracy theorist is actually giving ideas to those in power. But you have to consider the fact that without that shadow work or unconscious work, that the person who's trying to do good is actually the person who's actually doing the most evil. And throughout history, it's always been that case. Um, with in the case of order followers, in the case of people suppressing their conscience, thinking that what they're doing is good because they were deceived into thinking it was good. And just something to bear in mind, this plays a big role when it comes to the unconscious. And I take this at a very base level. I'm not a deep psychologist. I don't claim to have a deep understanding of this. Like I said to you, I haven't read most of Jung's books. I haven't read most of philosophy books. I develop my own philosophies. I do a lot of my own introspection, especially upon nature and such. But I do get tad bits of wisdom here and there from different sources, and some will appeal to me more than others, such as Taoism. But I eventually plan to delve into more and more as I continue, as I'm sure you have. Um, and same thing when it comes to languages. I know you're in South Korea. That's awesome. And my friends over there is super cool. I would definitely want to visit sometime. But learning from other cultures is so important. And I meet so many people from different worldviews, and they just think theirs is the best. And it's the same thing with countries or governments. It's like my government is the best. It's like our founding fathers thought this, and that's like, have you gone to other countries? Do you see what other people think? Um, you can see, just by looking at history or looking at different people around the world, already the answers to be found. And someone even mentioned in the chat that many people know there's something wrong, they just can't put their finger on it, or they don't know how to like really solve it. And so I think sometimes the simplistic view that Taoism brings is why I particularly like it. I think we've overcomplicated much in our reality to the point of sometimes speculation that isn't practical. And then it does actually stray away from new learners sometimes. It builds expectations for new learners and prevents them from building up their own comprehension. And there's a lot of aspects to this. I can break it down in detail if you want, but I generally speaking, I just there's a level of simplification that allows life to be more so effortless, which I think the Taoists were hitting on, because that would make it natural. And this artificial world tends to complicate things very much. Even though we have technology, we claim to simplify our lives, to make our lives easier, just as we claim social media was to make us more social, when it's doing the exact opposite.
Yeah, indeed. I've noticed that the same exactly that's right. Before you do go any further, though, in breaking things down, I was
Hmm.
just going to ask you whether or not you'd like to join us on camera. That's an option that we extend to any of our guests. I hadn't mentioned that to this point, but is something you're freely welcome to do, and we can flip back between yourself that
Sure.
it's being shared, your visage to the wider listening and viewing world, and the slideshow, which I've got to say that the the memes that you shared were very much appreciated. We're gonna hang on to those, and
Yeah. Oh,
definitely.
there's a lot more out there too. I'm
Oh,
sure I don't
it's
have, but
yeah, no, it's
yeah.
great,
Hey, what's that
good
picture of
stuff.
that guy standing next to the flag? That's not me.
Well, no, no, no. That's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's not me. Who was that?
That's wow. That's one of the virtual crew members. You have a
That's funny.
problem with the flag, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
No, I just thought it was funny. I'm like, who is that dude?
Yeah. No, that's
I'm
Thomas.
on
That's
camera, by the
Thomas
way. You can
Pascal.
show me if you'd like.
Okay, I will. So, oh
I don't have a
look.
problem with the flag. Look, listen. there's going to be people still use the Confederate flag in the South. You know, I mean, even after
Right.
the Civil War and it stood for slavery and all this stuff. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care about the what people title themselves, what icons they use. I'm not going to get triggered over it. I mean,
Right.
it's more so I care about what people do, what they think, you know, what they put into society. That's it. I mean, you can curse me out. My dad's from New York. He curses, says the F word like every couple words. I don't curse at all.
Yeah.
It's just how I am. You know what I mean? But like, I don't care. I care what people do, what they put into this world. That's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. And we're pretty much the same. I mean, when I say we, I'm speaking largely for myself, but a lot of the crew members here that we have within our virtual pirate community, you'll, I mean, we mentioned in the pre-show Fred Gingras, who I believe you've had at least one conversation with, interview, just going back a few months. But we love, it's freedom fueled truth bombs is one of the definitely drivers here to the network and the flagship endeavor, everything that we have to offer. So, and it's great. Your dad sounds a lot like mine, actually. So, but that's okay. That's okay. You're right. Exactly. Hey, you're not
This is
drinking.
culture.
Yeah, you're not.
It's
You're
just
not.
water.
Oh, I was gonna say you're not drinking alcohol, are you? Like
It's just
you
water.
just
Everyone
you
always asks.
can't.
They see this
No, no,
bottle, they're like thinking
no.
it's like
Geez, you're
vodka or
just.
something. I mean, it's like no,
I
it's
can't
just
believe
water.
you,
I swear.
if there's one thing you can't do, you can't drink alcohol, and you can't wear blue shirts either. Yeah, and
What on what?
you got to take. Yeah, you got to wear. Yeah, you got to wear pink shirts. So
Oh
pink shirts
gosh.
only on
Okay.
our
I'm
show.
sorry. I
And
didn't know we were live streaming on Facebook. You should have told me next time.
I'm just I'm bro. I'm pulling your wooden leg. Okay. I'm
I don't know if
just.
I want to go to South Korea anymore. I don't know, guys. Might work for
Uh-oh.
North Korea. Are you
Oh,
sure you're in
oh.
the right place?
Actually, that's a thing. Yeah, let's not get into that because there are times where it's pretty crazy. So yeah, maybe some other time we can discuss that whole business. But now,
Okay.
just to be
Go ahead.
clear, you've got uh, people commenting via your end of things because we are
Yes, I
engaged
do.
presently in a simulcast of sorts. Where can people find your stream if they're so inclined?
Yeah, so Corey, nature is the answer on every platform. Just look up Corey, nature is the answer, and you'll find me every platform. I'm live streaming right now on YouTube and Twitch. So
Gotcha. Well, we'd love,
mainly,
yeah, we'd love to have Twitch uh, at our avail, but for whatever reason, they shut us down. And you know how this works, of course. They'll just the standard business of having violated community guidelines in accordance with their terms and conditions. And well, do they ever give any specifics? No. So it's like thanks a lot.
typical.
So, yeah. All right. Let's see now. I don't know where would you like to take the conversation exactly? We do have a few questions and ideas here that we'd like to bounce off you before the approximate
Sure.
90-minute stream uh, has drawn to an end. But yeah, where exactly? If there's just a couple of things that you would like people out
Yeah.
there listening to be made aware of,
Yes.
like abolitionism, for example, and
Absolutely.
voluntarism, which that's the vision that we had. I mean, come on, it's the Robin Hood, right? Hashtag
Yes.
WWRHD. What would Robin Hood do? And I think maybe to some extent that it would be working in conjunction with how nature is the answer.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, people were arguing in the time of the abolition of slavery, chattel slavery in America, is slavery natural? And by the way, this is not pre-taped. The person in the chat. So,
Yeah,
uh, and
we're
there's your
live.
evidence. And
Yeah,
yeah, we're live. Do it live.
do it
I think
live.
yeah, it's a popular clip. Anyways, so what's important is people do understand the root cause problem and the root cause solution. Okay, and I will tell you right now what it is, and people may not like this. I mean, of course, the truth can be rather unsettling. I don't claim to necessarily have the truth, but I do claim to have a rather powerful revelation, which I would like to call the truth. um, And it's one that I cover in my book, Slavery Gone for Good. Like I mentioned, the Black Book edition, where it goes into detail with it. And I haven't seen it in any other book. As far as I'm aware, maybe The Most Dangerous Superstition by Larkin Rose goes into the psychology part of it. But now I've really nailed down the history and I give examples. And that's something that I don't think they necessarily provide if they're looking specifically at the philosophy and psychology. So, what am I talking about? The fact that government, ever since its first foundation, has always been, will always be, the nature of slavery. And this is going to be an alarm to some, considering the fact government is seen as the equivalent to society, if not the natural part of society, as if like it's just built in, interwoven into the fabric of reality, as if it's just natural for humans to just build governments. Now, it's natural for humans to come together, to organize voluntarily, as they always do, pretty much in everything in their life. I'm not against that. I'm not against hierarchy. I'm not against people coming together, people saying this person's a leader, this person should be followed, and other people should follow them too. I'm against the use of violence against the people who don't want to follow. That is slavery. If you're compelling someone what to do with their own body, which is their own property, or the fruits of their labor, which they attain with their body, that is claiming ownership over what they own. That is slavery. So you can break it down. The abolitionists, such as Lysander Spooner, would call this political slavery. And remember, I mentioned the form that the American abolitionists tried to end, chattel slavery. That's just one form. So when people say slavery's gone or that I'm discrediting slavery, they're wrong because I have a whole bunch of quotes from the abolitionists themselves. In addition, there's different forms of slavery, and we wouldn't have called it chattel slavery for no reason. Even people like let's see, Just Merlot would talk about, he's a psychologist in history as well, if you don't know about him, would talk about technological slavery. There'd be people like Gandhi who talked about technological slavery, even modern day researchers like David Icke, right? Leo Tolstoy talked about political slavery. And there was also military slavery that they talked about. So these are different forms, but slavery is slavery, right? So it doesn't matter really what form it is. If you understand the nature of slavery, you understand all the constraints that control people that otherwise shouldn't be there. And slavery is but an illusion. It's not actually a thing. Because if it's not natural, it's something that we don't need in our reality and something we can live without and something that has to be indoctrinated. You have to be indoctrinated in order to be a slave. You need to be captured in order to be a slave. Then it's a forceful condition. And you're not born with chains on. You're not born having to sign a birth certificate. The systems that be obligate you to do these things. But it's not nature's condition that does it. It's humans doing it to other humans.
Let's add
And-
one more to the list here.
Sure.
Of course, just sorry for briefly interjecting, but wage slavery, money,
Okay.
the
Let me
the
bring this
doubloons
up in
and
the book.
shekels, all that kind of the Benjamins. It's all about the Benjamins.
Well, let's first hear what you have to say about that, because I know this is a concept that's often brought up in different circles or communities when they talk about modern day slavery. It's this idea of wage slavery. So what do you have to say about it, first of all?
Not a whole heck of a lot, I don't think, and I'm pretty sure that your breakdown and your take and analysis would be a lot more insightful than mine. Although the one item that really comes to mind is the depreciation. I've thought about this ever since I was a little kid, not in any great depth per se, but just recognizing since the time I was about 7 years old, I guess. It's like, what's up with this economy and depreciation of currency? Why are the prices fluctuating and
Hmm.
wages, the cost of living and you know the to be able to purchase groceries and provide food for your family and so forth and
Yes,
it's an endless mouse trap, I guess, and hamster wheel
absolutely.
in many ways. So that's one of the key items and
Yeah. So,
takeaways.
and again, right now I'm detailing the root problem. I haven't got to the root solution because, of course, these are two separate things, but although they're interwoven. Um, I just want to make it clear that economic slavery does not necessarily mean wage slavery. Wage slavery is, I'd say, a specific category within the realm of economics. And I talk about economic slavery as well. I mean, this was a big contention, especially after the abolitionists toward the late 1800s and early 1900s. There was this talk of wage slavery and economic slavery because what happened was after the end of chattel slavery, the economy was a little shooken up, of course, and everybody was shooken up, and these slaves are now freed and they have to find out what to do. And so a lot of them didn't have a house. They didn't have any means of really preserving themselves because here's the master just freeing them. And so some of the slaves actually regretted being free because they were like, my slavery provided me with all the comforts, so like now I actually fear being free. And this is, by the way, symbolic for today's world where people necessarily fear freedom and the chaos that comes with it, unable to grapple with it and be self-responsible and have self-ownership, and therefore wanting to maintain their own enslavement. So that concept of mental slavery lives at the root to all forms of slavery. Now, when it comes to like the macro external forms of slavery, political slavery is the root to all of it: economic, technological, medical, whatever you want to call it. Political slavery is the root because if you don't have, like, if you have order followers increasing the evil, allowing the evil, legitimizing the evil, that evil will grow. And that's what political slavery is at its basis. Statism is that belief in human authority, the belief that humans can, that they have the exemption to do wrong. They have the right to do wrong. And that right allows any wrongdoing to grow. So whether it's medical and somebody's trying to force inject someone, they're going to use the law to then mass mandate on everyone. Now it's
scientism.
way worse.
Trust the science.
And same thing with the economy. What happens when you put the government in charge of the economy? Has results gotten better or worse? So, if you put the government in any scenario, you're adding violence to that scenario. You're adding order followers who are just doing what they're told and not thinking for themselves, not doing what's actually right. You don't have actual competition between the free market. So you have a monopoly. And then you have a bunch of economic problems. So do you see how the root to a lot of these systems is political slavery? Now, what did I say too? I said all government has always been, will always be slavery. So what that means is that you wouldn't even have chattel slavery if it wasn't for political slavery. You wouldn't even have these other forms because even the abolitionists talked about this. You cannot maintain slavery in such a degree that they had it in America. The abolitionists talked about this without government assistance, without people perceiving the government as this higher authority than the slave master. So really, who's the real slave master? And if you want, I have the quotes where they talk about this. I mean, it's amazing, having them say, hey, slavery wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the government supporting it, if it wasn't for the government's capturing and doing wars and jailing systems. And look at today, we still have chattel slavery in the jailing systems. And every government has been based on war, capture, and jailing system. Well, look up. How do you make someone a slave? War, capture, jailing systems. This isn't a coincidence. That's the nature of all governments. Show me a government that wasn't founded on war and violence. There isn't, unless it's voluntary, in which case, do you even call it a government anymore? There was the abolitionist Charles Lane who argued for a voluntary government. He was considered one of the first voluntarists, real anarchists in history. Anarchy in the sense of just no rulers, not no rules. And he recognized, like, hey, we can have all these systems be voluntary. And his colleagues were like, I agree with you, but is it really then a government? And this is what the abolitionists were talking about in the 1840s, 1850s. And this is the first ever use of the word anarchism coming into existence. And most people attribute it to Russia with Proudhon and other people who originated the term. No, it's the abolitionists.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe it would happen in both parts of the world if you look into morphic resonance. Anyways, I have this part on wage slavery, and it says, regarding the notion of the touted form of modern slavery known as wage slavery, Benjamin Tucker shares with us there is no such thing. A man's true wages are fixed and paid by nature. And consist of what he produces or its equivalent. No man is a slave because he gets his wages, though many men are slaves because they do not get their wages. As far as freedom is concerned, there is no difference between the man who produces for unknown parties on problematical terms, working with his own tools at his own risk, and the man who produces for known parties on specified terms, working with their tools at their risk. Both of these are wage systems, and there is no other system. Where there is monopoly, both are slave systems. Where there is no monopoly, neither is a slave system. The one condition essential to the rightfulness of both is the absence of the usurer, whose sole function is to secrete for his own benefit a portion of the laborer's wages. So an example of that would be taxation. So there's nothing wrong if somebody enters a contract with someone and wants to, work under someone and receive a wage. What he's saying is that it's not fair for the government to step in and say, I'm going to take some of that for myself. And you didn't really sign up for that contract. You didn't voluntarily choose to do it. So he's saying, with your own tools at your own risk. And this is somebody who was against, a lot of the capitalist monopolies who were taking over the area. So he was very much against a lot of like the exploitation of workers and all this stuff that a lot of people talked about at the time. But at the same time, he was recognizing, hey, the biggest one usurper in this world is the government. And they're causing the problems. They're the root cause to this. And people can enter contracts for all sorts of things, at their own risk. And that's what the anarchists, that these founding voluntarists understood is people are free. He had a catchphrase. He said, liberty is the mother of order, not the daughter, insinuating that you cannot have order without freedom. And many people assume freedom to be chaos, and therefore they fear freedom. So these are concepts that do deal with psychology, and not a lot of people are familiar with it. But you know what? It is growing. People are looking for answers. People are sick of the two-party system here in America. People are desperate, and they're going to latch onto different things, yes. But you know what? You can call it natural selection, whatever you want to call it. But these ideas are going to inevitably rise, especially with the use of the internet, and that's why they have to censor people, because that's their only choice left. And then their only other choice other than that is to affect people medically to where they can't think at all, because there's no prevention of these ideas growing. They're going to grow regardless. There's only more and more voluntarists. There's nobody going back. No one becomes a voluntarist, understands the nature of slavery and government, and then says the next day, oh, well, you know what? I was wrong. I'm going to become a Republican or Democrat again. I never met anybody like that. Okay, so there's some of them that are confused, that think, oh, well, maybe we should vote here and there and play the game. But they don't necessarily realize that that's how we got into that mess in the first place. And the way we get out of it is just by creating those voluntary systems right away. It's just, let's get them going. And the more we create them, we show by example. We can do what Gandhi did, Martin Luther King Jr., civil disobedience, non-violent resistance. There's so many other methods other than voting and political action that actually work in history, that actually affect hearts and minds. And that's what actually changes this world, right? Not just scribbling something on a piece of paper.
Right. So your particular stance on the issue then would be not to vote at all? Is that what we're hearing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would actually contend that is the problem.
Okay.
So
it just
yeah.
encourages them, as the expression goes. It just encourages them.
It enforces the belief system statism. And that's because it acknowledges that somebody still has the right to rule over you. And so long as you acknowledge that someone else does, it doesn't matter who it is, you will forever be a slave. And that's just the truth of mental slavery. Again, this is how we enslave ourselves, and this is why it's the hardest, worst form.
Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but self can free the mind. Yeah, Bob Marley, of course, redemption song. And I know you had a thing or two to say about the whole pirate angle. Of course, pirates, yes, they robbed I, stole I from the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I, from the bottomless pit. So there's that.
Oh, yeah.
What? Yeah. Oh, yeah. What?
Well, I remember this was like months back when you guys first contacted me. There was I wrote a little poem or whatever to share because you wanted me to share like a poem. I was
We've
like,
got
all right,
it. Well, I don't know if
you have it.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if it's a poem or not, but let's see.
I don't know where to find it on my own computer.
Well, it's kind of just a brief sort of analysis, kind of.
Yeah, it was something like you guys wanted something fun, and I was like, all right, I came up with this thing based on the pirate theme.
Kind of cynical.
I don't know what I say. I have no clue. I forget.
I don't blame you for being cynical, and that's the thing. Is like here's what the point I wanted to make, and with respect to, well, look, once again, Robin Hood, hashtag WWRHD. What would Robin Hood do? And I'm serious about this whole business of the nature is the answer. I mean, he was the green man, was he not? So that's definitely worth taking note of. But Pitates de Dios, we recently had one of our venerable original crew members pass away. Actually, he was really ill, and he did manage to hang on for a couple of years beyond the point where he could have already died. So that was good. He had a chance to spend some quality time with his family. He was, out of mostly the Los Angeles area. Long story behind that whole ordeal. Happy sailing, Pirate Larry. But Piratas de Dios, yeah, the Pirates of God. So here's the deal: is that the story is the way he explained it to us. The pirates. Have you heard of Piratas de Dios, the Pirates of God?
No, I have not.
You know about the Blues Brothers? We're on a mission from God.
No,
Y-
I don't.
Oh, you don't know that? I guess, yeah, the younger generation. You got to check out the Blues Brothers. You might get a kick out of that
I
movie.
mean,
So,
I think I know something with blue guys that might be totally different.
oh no, 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 no! The blue Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, your dad
Yeah. Oh,
bounced it off a
absolutely. They would
pop.
know.
You know
Just by
him.
the name of their names, it sounds like Italian. You'd be like, oh yeah.
Well, you'll see. You'll get, so, anyways, and let's not forget the word. This the very term government. Do you know what that means? Etymology. It should be pretty simple, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Presumably, you
Yeah, a lot
do.
of people say what the etymology is. I don't always focus on that because, again, it's kind of like not to me psychological, philosophical, like in the present, everybody can understand it. But it is cool. So I know, like Mark Passio brought it up to my attention, Gervano mentis, which means to govern or control the mind.
Mind control. That's right.
Yeah.
It's really so. So anytime I work with adult students here on occasion via South Korea. It's my ELF gig, uh, English language facilitator, and the anytime we see this mente is the Latin. It means mind. So anytime we see that
Mhm.
suffix, we should be thinking like development, testament, firmament, you name it. Definitely taking note of that. So and the coding of language is something
Yeah.
I'm sure you're well aware of. Once again, the legal fiction, the straw man, naval admiralty law. There's so much people such as Mark and yourself, although he's been at it for a few more years, presumably. But that being said, I'm really impressed with the way that. How many books do you have now? It's like 4 or 5.
7.
Yeah, like, and yeah, geez, you look like you could maybe be about 32, maybe. Not even that. I don't know. You got a kid face, man. How old are you? Do you care? Does that
I was
violate
just
your?
talking to a friend today about how people judge me for my age since I was 11.
that
But I know you're not judging, you're just asking a question, so that's fine. I sometimes do it to people, I can't help it as well. I'm
old?
23.
What? What? 23?
Yeah.
You look. I'm sorry. You do look a little older than that. Maybe I just don't have a good grip, a
Yeah. I don't
decent.
know, the technology probably does
I
it.
mean, you don't look like a grandpa or nothing, but you can see, like, I mean,
My
the way
generation
you're
is aging
so
faster.
incredibly well spoken, and it's amazing. So I don't know how you find the time, or to dive headlong into this material and be able
Again, yeah. I will tell you, it's my own self-reflection most of the time. Now, of course, when it comes to the slavery book, I have sources in there. You can see the sources and all that. But I'm just saying, like, when it comes to psychology and stuff, I encourage people observe the world around them and take notes. I mean, I'm not claiming to be an expert. I told you this. So I don't claim to have the answers. But that isn't that the very concept of voluntarism? What I represent, what I'm trying to share, is the idea that one person can't decide for everyone else how the world works and use violence to make everyone else comply. My message is quite literally the humble position of saying I don't have the answers. No one person has the answers. This is why we need to live in a voluntary world. because every time we try to think we have the answers, and you can look at psychology and think about all those people that think they're right, and then they put themselves in a box and they presume that to be their identity and their ego. Look what happens. It's no surprise. Why do you think power corrupts people? I mean, you just look at the nature of it. But it's unfortunate because it's simply been ignored. I mean, you could even go back to Herbert Spencer, one of the first, originators of evolution and this concept of survival of the fittest. And people are like, well, without government, there would be chaos and survival of the fittest and the law of the jungle. Do you look at what those founders of evolution even said? Some of them were actually like very liberty minded. One of them, Herbert Spencer, was super popular in the 1800s. I have a ton of quotes from him. He talks about what he calls the law of equal freedom. And he looks at things from a psychological point of view, proving the fact that humans can eventually prove that government is impossible. Because as they prove over time their moral superiority is to saying, like, this is who we are, we understand ourselves over time, and we see that we don't have this right that we just kind of made out of thin air. Just as we did with, thinking priest kings could rule over us. I mean, that was the first form of government, was like these people who said, hey, God gave me the right to rule over you, and therefore I have the right to rule over you. It's like, and then everybody's like, oh my gosh, God gave it to you? Wow, you must be like super, we must, obey you. And so they consider them the sovereign, super regnum. You like the etymology of words. So they call the king and queen the sovereign. In reality, aren't we sovereigns over ourselves? We rule ourselves.
Not in the eyes of the sovereign. We are merely subjects.
Right. And isn't subject just another word for slave? It comes from subjugation.
Sounds like
If
it
you
to me.
bring,
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, you can break down the words, and it is awfully kind of coincidental that some things just kind of work out. But
Pirate reference. We found it here from Cornell Law School. I think this is what you're talking about. Piracy is defined as, quote, crimes such as robbery, kidnapping, or similar violent and destructive activities. If you do it once, maybe often, and you are seen as immoral, you're a criminal. If you do it often, unlikely to do it just once, as you are seen as moral, what does that make you? A politician, government, or it's like Bob
the
Dylan.
greatest pirate of all
Bob Dylan.
steals from everybody and convinces them that it's right to do so.
Yeah. Well,
That's what you were saying.
we got to get into this business of. Well, Bob Dylan, steal a little and they throw you in jail, steal a lot and they make you king.
Hmm.
Bob Dylan. Or some will rob you with a, Woody Guthrie, some will rob you with a 6-gun and some with a fountain pen.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So, but let's get into, we got so much going on here. It's a pretty, we're pretty lit up here this week. We've been having some computer issues with the desktop. I'm not sure how much of a coincidence that actually is. But Mr. Anderson, now this is we of course YouTube has long since demonetized us. We reached that 1,000-member subscriber level where you can become, you can qualify for monetization, and they got back to us in rapid haste, stating that we just didn't strike them as overly compatible, compatible sort of content with what their, I guess, long-term vision was of the platform. So slavery. But yeah, we have a blunderbuss blast coming your way here. No super chats, so blunderbuss blast. Slavery. Are we talking African American, the slave trade? That's a good question, Mr. A. Are we talking like Civil War, post Civil
When I
War?
talk about chattel slavery, I'm
Yeah,
talking about African
right.
slavery in America particularly. But chattel slavery is basically considered ball and chain slavery, where 100% of the products of your labor is being taken from
Wow,
you. So you basically don't own anything,
that's crazy.
and you don't have any wages whatsoever. So
Yeah,
that's complete slavery, and that's why people call that to be the only form of slavery. But that's why these lesser forms are more covert, and that's why people aren't so aware of what they are. Right, but they still are slavery because
right.
they're taking ownership of somebody, who the ownership doesn't belong to you. You're taking it and it doesn't belong to you.
The fruits of their labor, as Marx talked about. although he was really quite something too. He initially, I guess, when I recall, uh, started out as someone who supposedly self-identified as an anarchist, and then later
There's a
along,
funny story behind that.
uh-huh.
Do
Well,
you know the story about that a little bit?
let's hear about it momentarily. Before we do, just to finish the comment that Mr.
Mm,
Anderson had to share with us here.
sure.
So, are we talking like Civil War, post-Civil War, Emancipation Proclamation? Clarify, please. The Civil Rights Movement, Dr.
Chattel
Martin Luther
slavery
King.
has is existed just as long as government. I mean,
Right.
that was again the most brutal form of slavery. It's like, hey, I own you, I captured you, I went to war with you, you're now my slave, work for me. But then over time, the rulers came up with more sophisticated ways to rule the slaves, to where the slaves would actually want to be a slave and be convinced that their slavery isn't slavery, and that's where we are today. That's the art of political slavery: is to convince your slaves that they are no longer slaves and that they are essentially meant to be slaves, and slavery is their natural condition, although they don't recognize it as slavery, and therefore they stay in their condition of slavery. So I mean, I hopefully that wasn't a bunch of word jam for you. It's late at night for me, but I will say that's what makes it so dangerous. It's, and some people will say it's the most dangerous for that reason. And again, it's what creates chattel slavery. It's what enforces it. You cannot have private slave owners have that much power unless you have a government behind them that backs that power. And you can look at
Well,
police and
sure.
in its foundations. I told you this: the slave patrol, some of the first foundations of modern day policing. You can go back and see the abolitionist, even American founding fathers like Thomas Paine recognized this, and that's why he had some feuds with Washington. Now, by the way, when I share all this and Marx is like anti-capitalist, anti-power, it doesn't mean that he knows anything about this either. Marx was definitely a Freemason involved with different things, and that doesn't necessarily make him bad. I want to look at his actions. I want to look at his knowledge. But he censored someone called Mikhail Bakunin, who was
Really?
an anarchist, the
Yeah.
real anarchist in Russia,
Right.
who was starting his movement way before Marx, and he didn't let him speak at the International, which was a bunch of people who got together basically mad at the working conditions. And so Bakunin was like the anarchist, and Marx was the communist. Bakunin grossly disagreed with Marx and
Right.
warned Marx and said, "Hey, I know that we both are for the workers, but you want to increase state power. I want to actually get rid of it and reduce it." And Marx is like, no, if we give everybody what they want and give everybody everything they need to survive, then the government will just dissolve on its own. Like if everybody gets what they basically need and everybody's equal and fair, then we won't have to worry about the strife for power and division. But then how do you distribute all those things to equal people? That requires the government to use violence to distribute the materials. And Bakunin's like, yeah, this is crazy. So
Yeah.
Bakunin basically predicted the rise of communism and its failure. And if you look at Bakunin's work, it actually becomes quite evident that that was the case. Now, Bakunin, also from Russia, was pretty radical. At the time, all these guys were radical because they're trying to change things. Some of them were involved in protests and all sorts of methods I may not disagree, may not agree with, because some of it involved violence. That's where Leo Tolstoy came in. Leo Tolstoy read the same abolitionist I read. He messaged, he actually mailed some of the abolitionists in his lifetime because he wasn't long after the abolitionists in America. And so he adopted a lot of his Christian pacifist views, anarchist, pacifist Christian views from the abolitionists, because they were very deeply Christian and pacifist. So, far from being the case of what people think anarchy is like crazy, chaotic, and like trying to just throw fire in the streets and rebel, it's like you have some Russian anarchists who are talking about rebelling, but then you have these American abolitionists who are anarchists who are talking about, trying to free people in their minds and stand up to God's government and our conscience. Do you see how anarchy can be perceived in different ways, and how, these ideas can be utilized in different ways?
That's a question that you are addressing to me personally.
Well, I'm just like, just a general statement, right?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah. Sure.
if you see things from this greater perspective, you're able to see and not make title judgments or generalizations
Right.
about, oh, this is what anarchy, oh,
Right.
this is
Right.
what communism, oh, this, because
Well.
they've been used in so many different ways throughout history. And sometimes these people had good intentions going in, they ended up doing bad things, they didn't intend, or
Yep.
there's a bunch of different
The
things that
best,
happen.
the road to hell is paved with good intentions, as the
There
old
you go.
expression goes. Uh, Yeah, it's really quite something. The political science 101. The government is what they tell us, and that has been something that has stuck with me for quite some time. But they say that government is the sole legitimate uh what what is it, dealing with oh bloody hell, with fuck, I was gonna say extortion, aggression, coercive, yeah, sole legitimate uh yielder or wielder of coercive power. So the hegemony surrounding the coercive use of, well, the use of force and violence, violence really, I think, is what they say, and to make it quite clear in the political science text, and from there, I guess the rest of these books unfold. But it's like there's no disputing it. They're just, it's like, and the word that really stood out to me and has stuck with me ever since is legitimate.
Hmm.
Legitimate. So, but radical is another term that you brought up earlier. So I'd like to look into the term legitimate and break it down. I haven't taken the time to
Right.
do so.
Well, radical is an interesting one. It actually, I think, comes from the concept of roots. So
Correct.
it's like,
Correct. Yeah. Right.
yeah.
That's how the story goes. Well, like in mathematics, right? Algebra. I don't,
Mm.
my
Yes.
one of the few classes I ever failed, grade 11 algebra, to
Oh,
take
I
it.
loved algebra.
Well, I should have done better, man. I just was.
That
I
was
was.
my best one. I couldn't do like I never, by the way, I never liked reading in school. Never liked writing, never did
Oh,
that. Never
really?
expected to get into that.
Amazing.
Yeah. I
Wow.
was totally into math and all that. But
Oh, my other family members are great with mathematics. Just I seem to be wired in a slightly different way, which is more. Well, I played hockey. I was a hockey jock back at that time, and then kind of transitioned to the point where I, over the years, really pursued in earnest, I guess you could say, or pursued music, and that was my big thing, just to really, it was like a love affair with music, popular music, rock and roll, blues, folk, country, reggae, you name it, jazz. I mean, even the heavier stuff, it didn't really matter. So and it's an on again, off again sort of thing that I look at as a, it's a metaphor for a kind of woman, I guess, the spirit of the muse, that
mm,
the fire in the belly, as Van Morrison often refers, and the way that, the power of music too within the context of what we're discussing here. People like Woody Guthrie or Pete Seeger, for example, or any people, like, where are all the protest songs these days? And Van Morrison was one of the few entertainers and people of, a celebrity who actually had the cojones, and was just one more reason for me to respect the guy. He took a stand against the whole corona apocalypse, doing his homework to a certain extent, and then writing a number of protest songs, calling out the World Economic Forum directly, Klaus Schwab, in his lyrics. And the fact that after Eric Clapton, because it's, you talked about what was all these isms
hmm
of one sort or the other. Scientism is a big
Yep.
one. So, and the fact that I think I mentioned earlier the wage slave business, because to tie that back into the what forms of slavery, but it largely starts with the mind. I would it would seem. But scientism and Eric Clapton finally coming around, his family thinking that he was just crazy, of course, and now, this is the way science is really done. If it's allowed, you allow it to be driven by monetary motives and greed. I mean, what do you think's going to happen, folks? Like, chances are that's a really dangerous and irresponsible approach. And now we're, even though we are live streaming through BoobTube, we are going to kind of try to, a little bit of fancy footwork here without exactly laying it out there for people. They can read between the lines. Because I mean, these bastards have. It's just the way they function, the way they operate. There's a reason YouTube, the colors are red. Let's put it that way, okay? So, which
Yeah.
and I'm not down with the whole red business. Trust me. And we've been being lately. Speaking of YouTube and uh, and the Reds, we've been harassed through this promotional spam that keeps coming our way. The British Communist Party, I think is what it is. And it's like we're not even subscribed to these jerks, and they keep popping up. YouTube keeps sending
That's funny.
notifications. It's crazy. So what I was going to ask you, voluntarism. Speaking of colors, the flag that we have, our pirate flag, of course, it's somewhat intimidating. I never did finish the pirates, the business, the Piratas de Dios. We got sidetracked with the Blues Brothers. Let's not forget. But basically the Piratas de Dios, the pirates of God, are those who have reformed their ways in a past life, according to Pirate Larry. Um, pretty irresponsible characters who acted, basically created a lot of bad karma, let's say. And the term karma itself meaning simply action. So they engaged in a considerable number of bad deeds, bad acts towards others, and even perhaps on occasion themselves, without even realizing the harm they were doing. Uh, but in this life, they've come around and now they stand for the deal they've struck, I guess. The deal they've made with God is in this life to dedicate themselves to the welfare of widows and orphans, primarily. And so that's, since Larry's passing in particular, that's something that we've taken to heart and we continue to discuss here, to mull and hash over. Uh, and I think if that's a spirit that we can continue to fuel our enterprise with here, that good things good things will come. Uh, so the colors, the colors of the flag, but also I'd like to get into that just briefly here. And
Sure.
we are coming. We've only got maybe about another 20 minutes here, tops, to uh, this week's Pirate Radio Podcast feature show with now Cory and your surname. It's without looking at Endrulat. Is that right? Is that how you
Yep.
pronounce?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Oh, so that's not. It's not Ukrainian, is it?
No, I mean apparently it's like German or Lithuanian or something like that.
Okay. Okay. So you're Eastern European ish, and you're probably like a lot of folks. We're a mix of this and that.
Yeah.
It's the way things go, right? Over the years to the point where we currently find
Yeah,
ourselves.
apparently it might have been translated overseas. That's what I was told by my grandfather, who I can barely kind of get answers out of.
Ah,
So
how about that?
it's like,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah, I don't know. We really don't know. I'll be honest. And
Interesting.
you look up Engelat, there's like 1,000 in Germany. It's like I don't know a single one of them.
Interesting.
There
Interesting.
was a guy who reached out to me in like another state, and he's like, "Hey, I have the same last name as you." I'm like, "Okay." So it's like they do exist. I'm not like the only alien on Earth.
Oh, yeah. You've not been able to trace back your European roots though in a clear and decisive way. Is that what we're hearing?
Yes, basically.
That's unfortunate. So if you
Well,
did.
my grandfather had a
Mhm.
family tree. Actually, he was working on his computer, but he was using a lot of like really old technology. What was it called? Lotus. That Lotus was before Microsoft Word and all them. So he used Lotus as his main software. And I remember seeing it. It was pretty complicated. I mean, he used to do a lot of amazing stuff. He was an electrician, so he was like really, analytical with a lot of it. So, yeah, I don't know. I have to access that computer when everything, one day when I go back to New York and check it all out.
All right. Shout out here to Second Horizon, Svetlana Savinkov. Hey, great to see you dropping in here, Svetlana. If you missed the the opening segment, you might be interested in
It's pretty epic.
revisiting and seeing what essentially managed to archive there. Yes, Trump won. Good to have you on board as well, Mr. Trump. Someone who, from what we understand, was really making a lot of waves in the Bronx over the last day or so. That's pretty epic and historic, much to the Democrats' chagrin. But I really, in some ways, you could see the way that things were, be, being stage managed. I guess is one way of putting it. With Trump's role in all this and how he's going to return, uh, potentially, and if he does, you know, I think he's going to be none too pleased, and understandably so, with all that he's been made to endure and suffer. So, uh, why
Well,
he
you ask,
didn't the Insurrection Act? Are you familiar with that? Have you heard about of the Insurrection Act? Why he didn't sign off on that
yes.
his
Well,
first
I do want
term?
to mention,
Sure.
since because you mentioned like the flag symbolism, and then you
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
got
Yes.
over it.
Sorry about
I just
that.
want to mention,
Yeah.
well, it ties into this actually a little bit, so
Okay.
you can continue your point. I'll just answer it briefly. And basically, I don't want to get stuck on the icons or the titles or the symbolism and the colors. You know what I mean? Like,
Do
again,
not
I want to.
do not confuse the finger pointing for the moon. That is right.
Right,
Correct.
exactly. So I just want to make that clear. Like when it comes to like, voluntarists have like their own flag sometimes with like black and gold. The black stands for non-aggression. The gold stands for self-ownership. Stuff like that. Cool. I mean, awesome. I mean, there's gonna be people who get tattoos for stuff. It's like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like I'm not against it. I just personally, that's not my argument. It doesn't make my argument any stronger. It doesn't make it any weaker. It doesn't really do anything. So I don't really care what people choose to identify themselves with. I don't have an ego, so I'm not trying to like be flashy and brandy, be like, "Hey, look at all these colors and tattoos and stuff." And I got, but I'm just saying that's how I perceive it. And of course, there are problems with attaching your ego to those types of identities, which again goes back to Carl Jung and psychology and what we talked about. But when it comes to Trump, it's the same thing. We're looking at these people, we're putting them on a pedestal, we're giving them this position of authority over our own lives. We talk about them as if they're our neighbor, like our family member. We barely know them, they're millions of miles away. We didn't personally give consent and write a contract and say, hey, yeah, I want to be a part of this. No, and so it's quite funny how we engage in these rituals that have just been passed down generation to generation without actually really thinking through, is this logical? Does this make sense? And everybody's just like, oh well, we've always been doing it. Oh, and this is just America. This is how it always has to happen. That doesn't validate the argument. You can't just say, oh well, it's always happened. That doesn't make the argument any stronger. You could have said slavery has always existed. That doesn't make slavery right or wrong. It doesn't change it at all. The nature of the thing is what we need to look at. And so I encourage, if people want to look at the nature of the thing, they delve into my works. If you want to deal with the symptoms and you want to look at the outskirts and the things that rise to the top and the flashy imagery, then yes, you stay trapped in the consumerist, materialist world and consume the identity that is Trump or these flags and this nation and this,
Mm-hmm.
worship of icons and deities.
Now,
Anyways, all right,
yeah,
go ahead.
and is that worship or worship?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, and what's going on there, folks? So how do you
Mm,
spell this, and what's if you just take a yeah,
yeah, good
might be
point.
more of a something more to take note of than what most people realize, because we use language so often in a way where we don't stop to take the time to reflect upon and better break down the terms that are being deployed. So there we go, and it's something I encourage everyone, including the adult English as a second language students we work with here. Talking about how we are all artists and detectives. Artists in the
Mhm.
way that we speak and write, of course, and then detectives with the way that we take the time to maybe learn a little bit of Latin, Greek, or Sanskrit, and unlock, And when we do unlock the terms, the words that are used to communicate, not only, I guess, have a conversation with ourselves, but connect with and communicate with others and try to convey and express express ourselves, what's going on inside our heads, essentially. And while others, we all play the part of sounding boards too, which I think
Yes.
is really critical to this whole conversation. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
And there will be a day where people conform to my ideas that I'm talking about, like with a voluntary world. Although I would like to say they're not my ideas, because we live in a voluntary world for the most part. We just give the exception in politics, with political slavery. Just as the slave owner goes about their day to day business, and then on the side they're whipping their slave. It's like these were respectful people who no one ever thought would do these horrific acts behind the scenes, and people were like shocked and surprised when the abolitionists would say, look what they're doing, because these people had like a split personality. And in today's world, it's similar. When people are on social media, they have one identity, and then in their personal lives they have another identity, or when they're at work they have one identity, and then in their own life they have another identity. These have habituated into different patterns in society, which is why the unconscious is so important, because that unconscious is what you don't see that you're habitually doing. That once you catch on to those habits, like Stoicism or Taoism talks about, you start to become more in control as to what you are consciously doing. You're not acting too much with force. You're only acting when necessary, the right application.
Let's hear that one more time. Just the last, not just, well, the point, but last line that you had to share with
Sure.
us there, so I can really dial in.
Yeah, I basically said that we're not acting with force. We're acting when necessary. I like to say it's time and place in my philosophy. I have different ways of putting it. I think that's important to make it digestible in different forms. But essentially, you let's say you put the plant in the ground, you let the plant grow.
Hmm.
It has to do its own work.
Right,
You don't tug on the plant to make it
right.
grow. It's not going to make it grow. If anything, it's
Mm.
going to disturb the plant.
Here's a really critical point in question that we wanted to bounce off of you, and that's
Sure.
regarding borders,
Hmm.
borders and security,
Yeah.
and and
I have this in my book too.
the collapse of society, the collapse
Yeah, I
of
don't have to bring up my book.
the collapse of empires.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
many people these days, and understandably so, they are just observing, taking note of the parallels between ancient Rome and where America currently finds itself. So, how is what you're proposing as a, I guess, worldview,
Proposed.
lifestyle, and
Yeah.
pragmatic application?
I
How,
want people to stand on what they mostly live by.
right,
And know in their heart, in their conscience, but ignore in the case of superstition. So I'm not proposing anything new. To say that everybody should live and let live and live in a voluntary world, again, most people do this. They only give the exception unconsciously through politics, which they have a superstition called statism, which permits them into basically allowing slavery, which they are unaware of for the most part. And even if they're aware of it, they may be fearful of escaping it. As the slave realizes, oh shoot, I'm a slave, like Frederick Douglass, and then he's like, oh my gosh, I realize I need to be free. Because once Frederick Douglass learned to read and learned how he was a slave, it couldn't get out of his mind. Like, oh shoot, I'm a slave. I can have freedom. Freedom is a thing that exists. But like before that, freedom wasn't even a concept. It wasn't even an idea.
right.
He hasn't even grasped it because no one ever brought it to him and showed him, and he didn't even learn how to read and write. The education never brought to him. So this is all about education. Absolutely. This whole message. I'm sorry if I interrupted you, but
No, no, it's fine. I mean, that's what you're here for, is to respond to uh, whatever it is that I'm able to come up with and kind of throw at you. So, but open borders in
sure.
particular, and then foreign conquest, invasion,
Yeah.
fifth column,
It's funny because
military
this is all the
denominator.
things governments do.
Well, but it's foreign governments in this instance. What I'm seeing, and many others with the open borders uh, policy that Biden seems to be pursuing in earnest, that they're in doing so, what it's bringing to fruition and we're seeing manifest is some major problems because of it's a lot of the people that are making their way into the States are male men of military age.
Yeah. Okay. So you want me to talk about the borders, and then I think you mentioned a different topic, so we'd have to break
Yeah.
down each one.
Well, is that
Um,
yeah, and is it yeah, I mean, is it okay, or is it acceptable,
what the
laissez-faire, laissez-faire,
well,
just stay, yeah, yeah.
there's no such thing. Okay, so yeah, let's break it down. Right, there's no such thing as open borders or closed borders, and the topic of having everybody be free. There is such a thing as property borders and having your property and having, your house perhaps, and not wanting people to trespass on your own property. But would you call your property this entirely imaginary line going across all these different places? Would we not call this arbitrary? It can't even be maintained by individuals themselves. We have to hire people, which is also done with tax money, which is also backed by theft, in order to maintain it. And for what reason do we have it? Because we have a government in place that permisses it. So again, this is how the unnatural works, and this is how all evil works. Evil creates an excuse for evil. And as Henry David Thoreau and many of the abolitionists talk about, slavery begets slavery, freedom begets freedom. There was another quote, it talks about how slavery of women happened when men were slaves to kings. If you have one evil and you allow that, you're going to open the door for other evils. And this is the concept of, let's say, in medicine, you give somebody a drug and then that drug causes a problem. So you give them another drug to treat the symptom. And then from there, it's ever treatment, symptom management. And so we say, oh, well, that drug isn't essential. Like we need that drug because it helps with that problem. But it's not actually helping the problem. It's helping a symptom of the problem. So in the case of borders, when we're talking about open versus closed, it's as a dialectic, just as much as abortion, by the way, with pro-life versus pro-choice. It's a dialectic that is probably one of the best to help foment division. So it creates the illusion that humans, that we still need a system imposed over others, of human authority over their fellow human beings. And this is just another justification and excuse, no more than someone in the abolitionist time era saying, hey, without slaves, who's going to pick the cotton? Without slaves, how is the economy going to be ran? And all these different concerns that people had. There's going to be concerns of, yeah, what will happen if we open the border, this and that? But the truth is, if we follow the truth works out. And if we don't follow the truth and we follow what we know is not the truth, even though we say it's symptom management, it's to treat a condition right now, it's just going to cause more problems later on. And so what I'm saying, and by the way, I was very constitutional conservative, pro-Trump. That was like I had every position of Trump. I had his water bottle. My family worked for him actually. I know everything about the guy. I know like colleagues. Like I swear, I helped open the door at the polls. I watched all his speeches. I had every talking point. I had the conservative speech. Right. I was never really liberal leaning, and I still am not. Obviously, I'm not libertarian either. If it's not obvious, I don't have a position. I want people to live their own lives voluntarily. I had that position of we need to have a strong border. We need to close the border, build the wall, right? Trump would say, let's get Mexico to pay for it. All these things, right? And I understood fundamentally. I was like, yeah, these people are illegal. They're coming overseas. They don't respect our values. They're bringing drugs. All the same talking points, right? And I can say them. I totally can understand when a conservative has these concerns. The problem is, again, they're not looking past their own belief system. They're not looking beyond the fact that in reality, not in government, in reality, there is no such thing as these big imaginary government borders. These are arbitrary lines made up by some men, whims that we call legislators. And it changes. We took Hawaii illegally according to our law. We take different places and we just claim it as our own. And now it's part of our borders. So now we can take other people outside those borders and do what we want with them because, again, government is slavery. So we can just claim ownership over everybody within the land, say they must stay there, and then everybody outside the land, they can't come in. Does this sound like a good scenario when I phrase it like this? Because I guarantee you a lot of conservatives aren't going to phrase it like this. They're going to phrase it in the terms of like, oh, these are criminals and they're coming over and they're disrespecting our legal American world and our culture. And I understand. I care about my culture, and I wish America's got a lot of intermixing. I'm still not a fan of that, in the sense of is a lot of confusion and people don't know who they are. And yes, there's a lot of drugs coming over from other countries. But that does not excuse the fact that we're creating authority in man and making the problem worse by doing so, and therefore creating order followers, which will inevitably create another Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia or communist Mao. I mean, this is the pattern of history. These were constitutional republics, and they turned into some of the most tyrannical countries on earth because you had order followers. And it's just that simple. As long as you have order followers willing to suppress their conscience, it doesn't matter what system you have, it doesn't matter what laws you have, it doesn't matter what borders you have a system that's going to collapse and it's going to cause problems and it's going to cause all these other forms of slavery. And I know I'm coming at this from a very macro worldview, and I have to break down each individual scenario. But yes, the border is one of those symptom management topics that unfortunately, if you can't see past, you get really stuck on, and then you use it as a justification to continue your own enslavement.
South Korea, speaking of order followers, Marx back in the day referenced uh, what he called Oriental despotism. And I there was a lot of great points that the guy made as far as his assessment and analysis of what the plight of the common people essentially,
Yeah,
and class
that's
struggle
and
and
that's how they got him on his side. That's how every politician does it, right? They say what the people want to hear. Doesn't mean it's actually
right,
true.
right. But the problem is, as we've seen played out in history, is the implementation of what he proposed. Clearly, it's not feasible, and I think you've already hit on that during the course of the introductory portion to today's show when his name came up earlier. So people, if they missed out on that, can have to revisit that with the archived end of things. But yeah, big problem. What we found here, as throughout the course of the scamdemic, corona apocalypse, plandemic, the Fauci virus, dear God, you know, just a total train wreck.
Yeah, you want to be careful of that one on YouTube.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't think well, who knows? You can, like I said, you could recite the alphabet and have them shut you down just because it's that bad. But yeah, major problem here with order follower blindly following orders without stopping to say, wait a minute, is this just? And it may be legal, but is it lawful? And my body, my choice. What happened to that? Like, why is it that people seem to be so with this herd mentality?
Yeah. Well, abortion's
So
a good example. I usually put it on the parallel of the border topic because
uh-huh,
it tends to cause the most division
right.
for the reason that the answers live within both answers. And it's like if you can't sift through and discern, that's a big issue. And that's why you have a lot of like people who are calling themselves centrist nowadays. I mean, people don't know voluntarism exists, and so they still want to engage in politics. So it's like they either go to libertarian or now this centrist term or whatever else they want to invent, trying to find new alternatives. I mean, it's like it's funny to me. Um, because you have this like very self-evident reality that most people live that they simply aren't putting their feet on the ground with. It's like morality. They know what's right, they know what's wrong, but they just can't stand firmly on it. They have to have some sort of contradiction or hypocrisy, which again is unconscious, which means that somebody needs to kind of like shake them up and help them see their patterns of behavior or what they're doing that might be contributing to harm they don't want themselves, but are doing because they don't think it's harm. It's the same thing with an addict or somebody who's going through an abusive relationship. They think it's fine, that they don't know how to get out of it. They feel like they're going to face major withdrawal. It's all the same things. I mean, we really are addicted to politics and the sports game that is politics and playing those rituals because we have for so long and everyone else
It
tells us to do it. And in school, that's what the system is designed to
it
do.
is pathetic the way watching the theatrics, the pandering, and just the stage, the puppet show in Congress, and the way that, and YouTube as an example, social media, so and so just destroys his opponent in Congress, or so another person annihilates this other individual. And it's like, give me a break. It's just, it's what a
Yeah,
farce.
Ben Shapiro wrecks.
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro
Oh yeah. Oh
destroys. I see
yeah.
those all
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
YouTube. They're
Yeah. It's like,
hilarious.
oh my god. Hashtag clickbait. Come on. Oh, give me like.
I
Oh
mean,
jeez.
let's be honest. I think I do the clickbait too. I mean, a lot of us do. You know, the point is the content, but yeah, it's funny. It's funny for sure.
So okay, we got to give a quick shout out here as we wind things down. DK Spiracy, sorry we missed out. Just kind of acknowledging your presence. Thank you for your quality comments, DK. Always someone who definitely manages to step up and really
Thank you.
inject a lot. Do you have you heard of DK?
Yeah, he stopped by my live stream, so thank you, DK.
He's
Appreciate it.
pretty colorful character. What the most censored live streamer via New Zealand is one of the badges of honor that he carries. Ourselves as well here out of off of the Korean Peninsula in a similar state of affairs. Believe it or not,
Yeah,
something that we can claim for ourselves. It's mostly shadow banning, but as just looking at the farcical nature of what's taking place here behind the scenes, most people have no idea how we just time and again, the throttling down that we have to endure is just one example. But as we mentioned earlier, Discord, Twitch, completely a Gab as well too. Believe it or not, it's amazing the way that we were up against this. It was like a firewall through. Oh, what was the name of these? I'm pretty sure it's a CIA type cutout and operation. I'll have to come back to that later, but it was like a firewall operation that very sophisticated. If you click on Cloudfire, does that Cloud? I think it's called
about
Cloud.
fair.
No. Oh, yeah, Cloudflare. Correct. Yes.
Yeah, it's just something like that.
Look into check out their homepage, people, and tell me that they're not, tied into something or another. It's rather dodgy, to say the least. Very sophisticated, highly financed, and they want to block people such as ourselves from being able to access sites like Gab. So and Gab, it's almost like I'm not sure what their deal is exactly, but to me, they might be in cahoots with one another too. I really couldn't say. So, but it just goes on and on. But we're here nonetheless. We are continuing to you know, stay the course, as it were. Definitely,
Yeah.
stay the course and maintain our place here within. It's a fifth estate digital underground. Essentially, is where we find ourselves. This internet, this desolate internet ghetto. Skullport Harbor, and but we have it's great, man. We got a lot of good people within our relative vicinity, as you can probably uh, see and hopefully hear. Crunchy Tacos. I think we've had them connect with us here from time to time in the past. And who else did we miss out on? There was Angel, the Jackal, of course, out of Florida himself. Believe it or not. So
Oh, nice.
yeah,
Let
we've
us know if you're in Florida. Connect, please do. We
uh,
have a network we're building all throughout the state.
he I think would definitely be up for something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
please.
yeah, and he has his own. He's really plugged in as well.
I'm actually surprised I'm functioning. I mean, I was on like 5 hours of sleep
Oh my God.
yesterday.
Well,
um, and I just did it. I did that event I told you
right.
in person.
Yeah.
So
How
we
did
had a
how did that
bunch of.
go? Let's hear
That
about
was
that.
awesome. We had a speaker, Todd Pittner, Mike Adams, co-host. It was
Wait a
awesome.
minute. That's the health ranger.
Yes.
Oh, good
Yeah, we
stuff.
had his co-host speak for an event. I know I'm connected with them. I never expected to be connected with these guys. It blew my mind. So
Well,
yeah,
you're good.
we have the health ranger Mike Adams, and we got the Earth Council Jim Gale backing our project that we're doing in Florida. It's insane, man. We got some of the best connections, and these are the coolest down to earth people who are very open to a lot of ideas, innovating constantly on solutions. I love it.
Excellent. Well, and that's the thing is the way that we ourselves, once again, in setting out on this journey, one of the main items for me personally was to better develop my public speaking ability and sense of uh, confidence without being overly cocky, obviously. But we like to have fun, and we do goof around from time to time, trying to take ourselves too seriously. Well, at the same time, uh, focusing on better. And it's amazing the way that, what is it now? This is our ninth year, I guess. So just like Lao Tzu himself, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So
Mhm.
that's what we've been committed to here over that period of time. And voluntarism. Here's the thing: Marx talked about, as an example, from each according to their abilities, to each according to their needs. We say our take on that is no, it doesn't quite work. And hey, correct.
Yeah.
What? But let me just to revise that somewhat. From each according to their abilities, to each according to their contributions, or in other words, what they put into it. Often you hear, "What's in it for me? What do I get out of it?" Well, how about whatever you put into it? Basically, hopefully, and more.
Yeah,
So
and again, you would get that voluntarily. Marx is like trying to create a whole framework of like this is how society should operate. No wonder why it goes bad. Even if it sounds great, even if it sounds like everybody's down for it, because as long as you still use a government, there's going to be violence to back those proceedings and to make that go into effect. So it's not going to actually solve anything. It's going to completely backfire. No matter what you do, I said, no matter what system you put in, it can sound like the nicest thing. Let's make everyone equal. Let's give them all food. Let's make sure they're on a healthy diet, if you can even determine what's healthy for everybody. That's the thing. It's like there isn't one cure to every disease. There's no one government to every, to the whole population. When are we going to understand that every human being is unique? It lives their own life, has their own perspectives, has their own worldviews, doesn't wear the same clothes, doesn't like the same taste, doesn't. It's like it's so self-evident. But really, we just haven't embraced it because we're like, oh, but those fearful people, there's these small bad guys. And if I don't create an authority in these people who can guarantee wrongdoing, then these possible bad guys are going to violate upon me. It's insane because what we're doing is creating, again, a legitimization of violence and a guarantee for it and a continual guarantee. It's like not just a robber who comes in your house and steals your stuff once and then leaves and does it because he needs to survive. It's a robber who says, I have the right to rob you because everyone else said I can rob you. And if you don't like it, well, I'm going to lock you in a cage and I'm going to keep coming back and make sure I keep robbing you. Like that's the world we live in. It's way worse than just a pirate or a robber. That's why I'm like telling you, they're the worst pirates.
well, how about illegal immigrants?
Well, again, they're criminals, as we call them, but we have to understand where they're coming from. A lot of them are ill-minded. They have a lot of problems that may cause them to do their behaviors. And if we're going to approach it holistically and intelligently, we're going to say, let's not impose a system on all the good people to make all the bad people better. It's like, again, it's nonsense because not all the good people are going to want that system, including myself, because what that involves is my money going some places that I don't know where it's going, and for some causes that I may not support, right? So it's like you want to obligate and force people to do something against their will just to prevent other people from not getting coerced against their will. Do you see how it can get very hypocritical very quickly? But in addition to that hypocrisy is the legitimization of the violence, which then precedes the violence with the growth of it. And then that's how you have an inevitable growth of government. I mean, Carl Jung even said that every government, no matter if it's limited or whatever, turns into autocracy. It always grows. It cannot be limited. And that's because of the nature of what I just described. It's always going to grow. And there's no way you can limit it, as our founding fathers thought they can create some perfect document, which they did behind closed doors, and Patrick Henry warned about, and Thomas Paine warned about, and many others who weren't even there.
Those who govern the best govern the least. I'm not sure. Was it maybe Jefferson that said that?
That was
So,
Henry David Thoreau. But then
oh,
the line
okay.
after that, which historians often leave out, is that which governs best is that which governs not at all. So
Ah,
he says that after that phrase,
how
and he
about
says
that?
that's
Oh,
yes. Read it. It's from Civil Disobedience,
right.
and I have an excerpt of that in my slavery
Yeah.
book as well, because he was an abolitionist.
And he did spend a little bit of time in jail for what exactly?
Yes. He willfully denied paying taxes, which
Ah,
at the time they were very brave, right? And Gandhi did the same thing. Quakers did the same thing. It was very common throughout history to just say, "Hey, if I don't like the system I'm under, I don't like what they're doing, I'm just not going to pay it." It's like,
so,
how many people are brave enough to do that now? So this is an act of civil disobedience. It's an act of nonviolent resistance, whatever you want to call it, and it's the act that really causes the revolution in history. Probably the most effectively from my studies. And how I think we get out of this mess is you have one town or one community saying, we're not going to do it. We're just going to say no. But then having that exampled and demonstrated on camera, and then having the domino effect come in and people understanding why they're doing it, and then not wanting to create another system after. I mean, there was a transition period between Britain and America that the founding fathers talked about, how in Massachusetts there was no government. And they talked about, wow, this kind of goes against everything we thought, because they're living in peace and harmony. This is something Thomas Paine talked about. Not a lot of people saw this part of his writings, and I have other founding fathers talking about it too. And it puzzled them because they were thinking like, wow, it's kind of like puts everything on its head. But everyone had such a belief in government, thinking, oh well, it's inevitable, so we need to like form a perfect system. They had such a belief in that they inevitably just created a new one. And again, it's from few people claiming the authority, saying, okay, well, let's have George Washington be this authority figure. Let's push out propaganda, have everybody believe this person saved us all from the wars or did this and that. And then they circulate it, they censor the anti federalist material, the material that goes against the mainstream narrative, just like they do now. And you just have the repeat of history over and over and over again of censorship, put in this system, censorship, put in this system. And that cycle is going to break with the invent of technology, where we can now mass distribute information. Because when the abolitionists had the invent of the printing press in the 1800s, that allowed them to share their message on a mass scale unlike ever before. There were abolitionists before the 19th century. You just don't hear about them because they were alone and they couldn't share their message with the masses. And there were philosophers who had great writings that you don't hear about because they didn't have the printing press. But once the printing press was invented, boom, you can share a message far and wide. But again, that's, censorship has always existed, and then censorship, now exists in a different form. But as we now have technology that can reach people very quickly, like you're talking overnight, the potential to change the world is even more rapid. That can be good, but it could also be very dangerous as well.
indeed, yeah, absolutely. So, and in relation to that, yes, Trump won, stating here, I don't know who this guy is, but buffering during some of his talking was crazy. They want to shut him up, and I had full internet. So,
That's a good way
hopefully,
to paint a narrative for the conservatives.
well,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
my guy's getting censored. More reason to support him. I mean,
yeah.
do you not see that when the media attacks him, it becomes stronger? Do you not see, like, when Gandhi said that first they laugh at you, then they make fun of you, and then you win? Does
Hmm.
that not make relevant? The media, I would say, is purposefully creating the boogeyman of one side versus the other, and purposely making a whole narrative against certain people on purpose because they
Hmm.
know it promotes them. I
Sure.
mean, that's literally how it works.
Uh,
It's reverse psychology in many ways.
oh God, oh the endless number of mind fucks
Yeah.
that exists, and look the work of Graham Hancock even, and the war on consciousness that
Hmm.
has existed since time immemorial, really, and as you pointed out so accurately, I would argue, this the elite, the priest class, the statist, supported and supporting priest class that goes right back to ancient time. And yeah, you can probably hear a little bit of
The
Um,
cat.
he's telling it's like it's time to wrap up here, Jaffe. It's lunch
That's
is
funny.
what we're waiting for. So we'd definitely love to do this another time. Have you
Yeah.
revisit and join us
And
again and.
thank you
Mhm.
so much for, having me on, and keep up the great work. You've been doing this longer than me, and I see your persistence at it. So keep at it. I love to see, just people doing their own thing in different parts of the country. The factor in South Korea is awesome, and one day I will probably visit, considering the fact I keep mentioning it to people. But if anybody in the chat, anybody's confused at anything I share, I wouldn't blame you. When I first came across some of these ideas, and again, I was very patriotic, very like obedient to the max, never really disobeyed anybody. All throughout school, very much followed orders. I mean, that's my mindset, and even now, I'm still very obedient. I just changed what I'm obedient to, right? To the truth, to you can say God, you can say nature, natural law,
Mhm.
but I just simply shifted that focus. But I grew up in a rather like moral household, and I think that probably set some foundations as I realized, wait, I'm contradicting my own morals. And I've interviewed people where they grew up in a very similar environment where they, had a very strong foundational family, and they were very obedient, and then all of a sudden they found out like the world is harsh to good people, and and that's
Yeah.
how this, and then we find out, and then soon now we become these people who are seen as the outcasts. And it's like, whoa,
Good
we
guys
we
finish
never intended to
last.
be.
The expression "good guys finish
Yeah, yeah.
last," right? So, and just let me briefly here, doing the quick math work. You were saying earlier your family worked with the Trump campaign, and you had a bit of a role to play there as well as a young
Yeah.
person, the ripe old age of about what, 16, 15 or
Yes.
16?
Yes, and I have pictures and stuff. I haven't showed them on my channel, but I mean, people were even like, "Man, you got to run for president one day." It was like hearing all this. It's like it's like I'm 16. They go to the rallies, and there's these adults. They're like, man, you should run for president. They loved my talking points, and I wasn't online at that time. I wasn't sharing. I wish I was to some extent, because people can see how much in that mindset I was then. But at the same time, I actually am glad I didn't, because I was able to formulate more of my conceptions before just going to the world and saying, "Hey, I know all the answers," which I don't claim to have the answers. But if I was then, I would have been, more stuck in that mindset, because if you build your brand around an ideology, you're more likely to keep it. It's like a burden to have to abandon something that you start. Um, but I don't have those types of attachments. I did, yeah. So I actually also, when the Trump campaign, all that happened, there was a channel called Niski TV, and you can find it online. He deleted all his videos, maybe because he came to similar realizations as me. I'm not sure. Lost contact with the dude. But he had great videos defending Trump in 2016, probably some of the best. And I had a whole playlist. It's still actually on my channel. It's like titled "Trump for President." I still have it there just to show on my personal uh, YouTube account. And it's a playlist of a bunch of videos. Most of it's deleted by now, right? And gone. But the Trump campaign actually used some of the videos that Niski created, and I helped Niski with creating articles for his news website he was creating. We were calling ourselves populists. Before anyone started using the word populist nowadays. I see people are using this word now all the time, populism. And we used it when nobody knew what it was in 2016. And now I see all the time conservatives calling themselves populists. I'm like, that isn't that funny? But yeah, I actually had a whole thing on Twitter where I had like talking about populism. You could probably go back to my tweets in 2016 if you really want. I don't know how to even go back that far. And I'm talking about, populism as being like, the people's party, and trying to, it's a very conservative point of view. But even better than that, it says like, hey, let's have term limits and stuff like that. It goes beyond the conservative view into more of like I guess you could say paleo conservative or whatever. But yeah, I got out of all that because I was not challenging the fundamentals. I was not getting to the root cause. And I was new to politics too. Let's put it that way as well. I fell into the energy. I felt it as a young person. There was a lot of young people um, going into that movement, into the
Right.
Trump campaign, and so I fell into that energy. And I think it was generally positive in the sense of it got some people to think outside the box, but if you're still a Trump supporter at this point, I don't know. It's a lot of questions I'd have to ask you. And also, just generally speaking, there just the nature of it is the issue. I'd rather not focus on the details of like, oh, he promoted vaccines or any of that. I'd rather not get into the details of that. I'd rather people look at the nature of these systems. And being that I'm a nature seeking person my whole life, I think it was inevitable I would come to this conclusion. Being that I was also in natural medicine, I'm a health coach. I like to approach things from a holistic point of view. So I think that was just part of the natural evolution of my thinking.
Got to ask you before we go, just because we're sort of, you know, in the area essentially, or in the approximate,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah, and then I'll head off because I have to do stuff early
Yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah. RFK Jr. I know it might be a little bit irritating given what we've
No,
covered
I
essentially
understand.
here and now, but within the context of things, RFK Jr. Just a brief rundown and assessment of his role within, because we don't hear enough about him. It's like Trump, Biden, Trump, Biden,
Well,
and
I like how
so
you say it's irritating because, I
yeah,
mean, it it's funny how people are going to be like, "What's your opinion on this?" It's like, do I need to have one?
yeah. Maybe you
So,
don't exactly. There you go. Maybe just
but
yeah.
and I am very well aware of him. I was well aware of him before he ran for president. All that I was aware of him in 2016, and even before that, because he founded the Children's Health Defense Organization.
Right.
And again, I was in the health field, so I followed his work for a long time. He was actually talking to Trump early on in 2016, talking about vaccines. Visited his hotel. I remember that whole shabacles.
I heard
And
there was a little bit of money that exchanged hands at that point too, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, I mean, but again, regardless, I mean, okay, so he cares about vaccines. Great. What does that have to do with him running for office and trying to seek the position of rulership over others? Has nothing to do. But as for him as a person, just as I would judge a cop, as for them as a person, he probably has good intentions like any other politician. Going to get corrupted, already corrupted by playing the game and falling into the identity, saying they're going to run for president, putting their name and all over everything. They don't realize what they're getting themselves into just in the beginning stages. Nonetheless, later on, psychologically, what happens to their own mind and those around them. But yeah, it's a problem either way. And there's also Dr. Shiva. I mean, you might as well bring him up. I mean,
Right.
he's another one. It's like,
Mm.
okay, sounds like he's got good intentions. So does every politician on earth to try to get your vote. Doesn't matter to me. I care about what solutions are done and what people are doing. So, like, I have more respect for Elon Musk simply because he doesn't run for office, because he's actually providing solutions for people. Even if there's, slave labor and all that stuff in his corporation, people spot that out and people start talking about it and criticizing it. He's not seeking the position to rule over his fellow man, though. And that is something that I think is admirable because he can change the world without power and authority. And that's a really important thing is he has leadership abilities. He's got intelligence, and people like what he has to say, and he can speak without saying, well, so give me your money, vote for me next election. It's like, if you like the product, buy the product. And that's why I like a lot of it's just going to sound weird. I like corporations. I like people who have solutions that are voluntary. Even if they're somewhat exploitative, I am not against them if they're voluntary, but if they're exploitative, I am against them in the sense of I need to spread awareness about it still. And so there's always education to be done. But that's again what emphasizes voluntary interaction, because if you don't have a choice, then there isn't really any education. If your idea is so great, why do you have to use violence, right? If your idea is great, people will use it because it's a good product. And if you have bad conditions creating the product, then the product's not going to be so good either. So there's a lot of interesting perspectives. If you're not aware of like Ray Rothbard and
Sure.
uh, a lot of the anarcho-capitalists, they kind of go into that perspective with the free market. And I learned from all these different people, and I think they all have very interesting ideas. But I look at the moral part of it because, again, I don't want to look at all these details. It's like unsure. You don't know what the world's gonna look like. You don't know how everything is gonna turn out. You don't know people's true intentions. You don't know what actually will happen with the collapse. Like, people are thinking, they're speculating, they have some idea, but they can't say they actually know. And I like to get really definite on what I say and stick with what I know. And so everything I said in this interview, in this talk, I can guarantee you this is going to last for the next 200, 300 years. But let's say you talk to somebody in politics. It's not even going to last 4 years, nonetheless, one or barely a couple months.
The
And I
bureau,
think that tells you something.
uh, sure, and the bureaucracy. Let's not forget it's politicians come and go. Bureaucracies certainly more a permanent nature to the way that they're structured, and they find themselves the legacy that they entail. So they're the real powerful major, highly often underestimated uh, institutions as far as their power and the power that they wield. And I guess a lot of that goes back to as you say, the ancient, priest craft
Yes.
class.
Again, if you want the full in depth, like going through a lot of these different things, I mean, my book is probably the best example for it. And I'll show it just for
There,
people, just so
there
they
we
know.
go. Look at that,
Yeah.
brilliant. Do you have it a PDF format or
Yes.
audiobook?
Yes, all formats. You should be able to find it. I'm self-published, so I have it listed on different websites. I know people might ask about Amazon. I could personally ship it if anybody is interested. But sorry to tell you, even if you go with other providers, Amazon probably gets involved one way or another because they have like thousands and thousands of printers, and I do it
Right.
on demand. I'm not printing it myself, so
Uh, So listen, it's been a pleasure, Cory, and so much more to cover, so little time. You've got to get some more work to attend to, but also a little bit of rest from the sounds of
yeah.
things.
Oh
As,
yes, I
as
have to actually. I'm touring another food forest tomorrow. I mean, I'm actually touring food forest pretty often, because they're happening all over the state. I'm telling you, this is a big thing, and I hope over there in Korea, if you guys need help, let me know. Reach out if you want, private message, you or anyone else in South Korea. I would love to help you guys get stuff going over there, and you guys would be a demonstration to the whole community. I'm sure there's already gardens and stuff, but a food forest that would be incredible. That
they
will
would
bring people to your message.
excuse the pun, but they would eat it up, I
Yeah.
guaranteed.
Well, maybe I'll visit for that too. If you guys have land or you have like a place where you're like, hey, this is where we can do it,
Right?
I would visit with my colleagues and we
Well,
can set.
no, you're talking to the right person. Actually, actually, it's my wife. Believe it or not, she's really heavily involved in exactly, I think, what you're hitting on there, and a lot of the women, the wives largely, and grandmothers that and so forth. It's a real shame the way that the chemtrails that we're targeted with here
Yeah.
so frequently
Us too.
contaminate, and just terrible, terrible. So we're trying to draw more attention to that, and
Yes.
wake a few people up here that are completely clueless because of the way that they're so much in a trance like state, frankly, and then with their spy phones, just zombie phones, eyes glued, and fixated to the ground, and ground level, rather than taking the time to stop, look up, and it's like, oh, geez, there's some
Yeah.
interesting activity there taking place in the sky. What is that? But absolutely, you've really nailed it there. So I'll put you in touch maybe with my wife behind the scenes and see where that
Okay.
goes
Well, yeah,
on
and
that.
like
Yeah.
right now, I don't claim to be an expert in permaculture. I'm still
Mm-hmm.
learning since I
Mm-hmm.
came to Florida. I never expect to get like really deep into this. But I can always make connections, and they're trying to develop a worldwide network. The people who are designing food forest around the state, and I'm trying to learn from them. Like these are people who are experts who've been doing this for a long time, and then we're trying to then create a replicable model so we can turn it into food forest in many parts of the country, of the world, and spread it everywhere, because the more self-reliant and self-sustainable we are, the less we're reliant on any of these systems.
Exactly.
And then we don't have to worry about the collapse, or even like EMF and what you say, like chemtrails. A lot of that is filtered through plants. I mean, plants do amazing benefits for people, even mental health. So to me, it's like an
Sure.
all-in-one solution. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All the best. Happy sailing, and we will definitely be in contact again soon.
Awesome.
Tally ho, matey.
Daddy-o.
All right, so there goes Cory. Uh, Thanks to him in a big way, of course, all that he brought to the table this week. Uh, things pretty much just unfolding in a very organic fashion. We had a few talking points here, items that we wanted to get to. I've got some work to do, clearly, doing what I can to follow so much of the presentations that he himself has made at the ripe old age of 23. Are you kidding me? The guy he is on fire. But I think really there's I didn't bring it up. He probably would have been interested in addressing it, but this business of reincarnation. He's a pretty open-minded fellow, of course, as we all really should be. If it's the truth that we're working on better, not just getting to the bottom of, but gaining a clear sense of. So it could be genetic, the level of his intelligence, his ability to articulate, communicate, stream of consciousness, and the way that he delivers his message and the insight uh, that he provides. It's there are other pretty high profile public speakers. Ben Shapiro is one. Really annoying, unfortunately, the way that he, with his stream of consciousness, I guess, something, the neurons or neurotransmitters that they're firing and able just to, Tim Pool, I guess, would be in the same category. Uh, Nothing against him personally, per se, although I'm not down with Shapiro's whole insane, rabidly pro-Zionist uh, agenda. Clearly, it's just there's nothing good I can say about that, unfortunately. But wow, just a really bright, intelligent, uh, smooth talking, articulate, and I think coming at things from the heart, not here to I don't think here to hoodwink anyone necessarily. He hasn't been corrupted. Would be the reason for that, and as far as we can tell, not any formal part of the great, the political machine, the great Satan, as maybe outsiders who are not big fans of the U.S. would frame things. So, but how about that, folks? Yeah, what just really the Liberator too. Never got around to asking him whatever happened to the plain old Liberator. There's bound to be a story behind that. So, and thank you once again to everyone in the comment end of things. You really lit it all up this go round. We blew the doors off in a big way. Well over 100, plus messages, probably more to the tune of several hundred. But we do, as oh, typically the case, receive the notification via Restream. Congratulations, and they encourage us to retweet that. So we'll try to get around in doing that very thing here shortly. Sorry we couldn't get to everyone's comments, questions, thoughts, and the like. Apologies. I don't think there was anything going on here as far as the buffering end of things, not via where we're situated per se. So, willing to bet it had something more to do with, maybe one or two of you perhaps, as you managed to connect with us via the wider listening world. We'll be back this coming Monday night is what we're looking at. We're on schedule to produce another late night in Korea. every 2 weeks, of course. So I think it'll be, it's either our 52nd or 53rd installment of Late Night in Korea, 11:30 p.m. Tokyo and Seoul time zone. More an early morning affair for you folks out across the Americas. 7:30 a.m. for the West Coast people. 10:30 a.m. if places such as New York, Miami, and Toronto, or for that matter, Montreal, Fred Gingras, is where you call home. So there we go. And just picking up a few real in live time notifications via Cory here through Facebook. So we'll follow up on those once we wrap things up. Off to feed the cats here momentarily as well. Pirate One Radio at protonmail.com is our email address. If you've enjoyed or appreciated, somehow valued, managed to benefit from anything that we had to share with you this week, or for that matter, over the course of the past, 8+ years. And by all means, we encourage everyone to dive into our archives via mostly BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble. YouTube, they love to censor a lot, unfortunately. But if you just kind of poke around a little bit, follow the URLs that we have situated via the show description end of things, you should be able to pretty easily find what you're looking for. And hopefully, what you stumble upon, or the digital booty that you engage will prove to be worth your while. And remember, half of everything that we do generate, this is another item that we never brought up with Cory, which we would love to bounce off of him at some point, but how half of everything that we do generate here through the show, which isn't a heck of a lot, to to be quite honest with folks, unfortunately, we really would appreciate more support through places like PayPal or the Teespring store end of things, or TeePublic. That's a story all in itself, why we had to launch that selection of merchandise. It's Teespring, a little too sensorial, was what it seemed. So we were forced to improvise. But we have the Patreon presence as well too. Let's not forget. And there are 4, maybe even 5 if you count Rumble. But places like Minds, BitChute, Odyssey, and DLive, they've all got their own in-house digital rewards systems. So anytime we see that you're helping us out through that angle and way of doing things, we're pretty happy, obviously. And the fact is, we set aside half of everything that we do manage to generate, or just immediately pass it on to people who are in need, including the likes of former Secret Service member. And isn't this something within the context of what we just covered? We'll talk to anybody, won't we? Doesn't matter, left wing, right wing, no wing, or what have you. It's anything goes here, folks. Just provided you're able to bring something to the table, and hashtag don't be a dick. if people are not able to handle or present themselves in a way which, where they find themselves crossing the line, then we voluntarily show them the door. So definitely something, that seems to be kind of why even, we would need to take the time or make the effort in mentioning these things that would otherwise be, for most people, quite commonsensical. But there we go. It's been a pleasure, folks. Hope you have a great weekend, of course. And be sure to keep us in the loop. We're going to be doing this again here quite shortly, as we mentioned, Late Night in Korea, coming up in, I don't even think I want to do the math. Is it, Monday night. It's 36 hours. We'll be seeing you shortly enough, soon enough. So have a great weekend. On behalf of Captain Long John Sinclair and all the rest of the crew here down in Skullport Harbor, until we meet again, Vivi's High. Digital, all too often intrepid seas. I'm your host, as always, the show's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder, reminding you, as always, keep your eyes to the sky and ear to the ground. Tally-ho!
Aye now, there we be. Having carefully looked over each of our navigation panel instruments,
checking every level, switch, dial, cable, knob, and pulley, by all accounts and indications, we indeed see it's time, once again, to drop anchor inside Mystic Bay.
Draw an end to yet another week of World Pirate Radio Live.
Remember,
if you're looking for a little more animated online action,
keep in mind we've likely got yet another great free-flowing Rogues Gallery after show
coming up for the next hour in one of our more premium, exclusive, and remote digital underground online pirate hideaways. Also, if you yourself have a new,
novel, intriguing, or otherwise underreported idea, unique individual, or pressing item in mind, be sure to either drop us a line directly over on WPRPN.com or fire us a quick email
via PirateOneRadio@protonmail.com.
We're always open to exploring fresh creative suggestions, intriguing guest ideas, cutting-edge discussion topics, and captivating themes.
Remember, WPRPN.com member site subdomain links are also always available.
Great for artists, musicians, podcasters, bloggers, social media personalities,
or pretty much just any old land lover
looking to boost their online visibility, presence, and reach.
Basic personal profile accounts can be launched for just $60 per year.
Staking your claim now helps not only strengthen you and the network, we're also looking out for the little guy. That's right, folks. As much as half of all WPRPN's profits are redirected right back into the hands of the people who really need it most. Community charity. After all, we are the Robin Hood.
You can further embark on your own personal pirate journey by either liking, sharing,
commenting on, subscribing to, or just following us via virtually any mainstream social media platform, including Twitter, Facebook,
Gab,
or Minds.com. So don't forget to become engaged. Until we meet again out on the high digital seas, I'm your host as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Tally-ho.